All right. We have Nilu. Chana, good to see you.
Hi, Rabbi. Good to see you all.
Yeah. All right. And then my mother-in-law's on, Connie. Good to see you.
Thank you. Good to see you.
All right. Let's do this. Finish up the laws of Challah, and then we'll move on. We're going to skip the next chapter after this, which is Melicha, which is salting. We're not going to talk about salting. We don't need to talk about salting. Okay, just to finish up, just to give a little recap about Challah. The minimum amount of dough that you need to separate challah is about 2.5 pounds. Now, you don't make a bracha, though. We don't make a bracha until you have about 4 pounds of challah. So at 2.5 pounds, you should start separating. You should separate challah, which means when you make the dough, you have to take a little bit of a little piece and burn it in your oven. But you don't make a bracha until really 4 pounds. 4 pounds is the kind of the golden number. Most people make 5-pound challahs because the bag of flour is 5 pounds, and like we said, that's the easiest way to do it. Is there a mitzvah to go out of your way to make challah? So it doesn't seem so, and I needed to check with the rabbi. There's a mitzvah to take challah if you're already making challah, but there's no mitzvah to go out of your way. I don't believe there's a mitzvah to go out of your way to make challah. Now, every mitzvah brings on bracha into your home. So if you want to take advantage of doing another mitzvah, like for example, tzitzis, there's no obligation for men to wear tzitzis unless you're wearing a 4-cornered garment. But we go out of our way to buy a 4-cornered garment to wear a tzitzis. So the same thing here with challah. So there is a bracha, special blessing in obviously doing challah. I know that was a question that people had. Okay. Now, here we go. The mitzvah of separating challah is mainly by the women. The woman's not home, and there's a concern that the time she returns the dough will be ruined. So, in other words, yeah, she's in the middle of making challah, and we know Erev Shabbos things are hectic usually, and there's not going to be enough time to bake it in time for Shabbos unless you put it in the oven right now. The husband comes home, he's like, oh my gosh, it takes an hour to bake challah, and there's an hour left till Shabbos, so he should quickly take challah, make the bracha, and do it. A maid can do it. Obviously, if she's Jewish, challah has to be taken by a Jew. You separate the challah, stick it in the oven. What if you forget to separate challah on Friday and it's Shabbos? So here we go. This could happen. And I've seen it done. Okay. If you forget to separate challah on Friday, or whenever you make challah, from the, whatever. It's on Shabbos and you already forget that you didn't separate challah. From the bread to be eaten on Shabbos. In countries outside the land of Israel, you may eat it on Shabbos. I'm sorry. In contrast, so in countries outside the land of Israel, you may eat it on Shabbos because, let's see if it's up. You must set aside one piece and separate challah from it after Shabbos is over. So you can go ahead on Shabbos. You've already this is after you baked it, I'm assuming. You should separate a piece from the actual challah itself. In other words, you already have a baked piece of challah. You should separate a big piece and put it aside and burn it after Shabbos. The piece should be large enough. Now, it's got to be pretty big because when it's dough, it's all clumped together. And obviously, when you cook it, right, it expands. And you have this. There has to be a certain measure that you have to be able to take. So you should take probably 1/3 of the challah. Which I will then say you have the issue of lechem mishnah, right? We have to have 2 challahs on Shabbos, and they have to be whole and complete. So what happens in this situation? Perhaps I'll share something in a moment. Okay, so you got to separate a good chunk of the challah. It should be large enough to separate challah with some remaining dough unsanctified. There must be noticeable remainder. If the day before Pesach occurs on Shabbos and you forget to separate challah from the challah baked, for Shabbos is a great conjure. Okay, I don't know if this is actually talking about if it's already baked. Okay, but with regards to baked challah on Shabbos, there's a bit of a machlokes. There's a bit of a disagreement. Can you go ahead and take challah once it's already baked or not? Some authorities say you're not allowed to. Some authorities say you can. Practically, what do we do in our community? I don't know. I'm not exactly sure where Rabbi Silverberg says. He's not here. But I have seen people take a piece, a nice sized piece, and they put it aside, and then they have challah. The other thing that comes up though is on Lechem Mishnah, we have to have there's an obligation to have two complete breads on Shabbos and on Yom Tov. Why? To commemorate the two breads that fell on Erev Shabbos, on the Friday in the desert. Everything we do is to remind us of what we did in the desert, by the way, right? Even Zeichel Yetzias Mitzrayim. We're doing this in order to remember the coming out of Egypt. Whether it's Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot, we always mention the same thing in Kiddush. Not on Yom Kippur. Okay, so what do you do in a situation where you don't have two full challahs? So one thing you should do, should you go ahead and just make hamotzi on the nice size perfect challah, or should I break it in half? What should I do? So it seems like the main opinion is that you should cut a slice. You should take another piece of bread, whatever other bread you have, and put it together with your good whole bread, and all fine and hunky-dory. What if you only have one challah? If you only have one challah, it says you should slice the bread. You should slice your challah, and so that you can have two challahs. Yeah, so if you only have one challah and there's really nothing else you could do, by the way, you should always have an extra box of matzah in your house. And don't get the thin matzahs because they break. But you should have good, Manischewitz matzah in your house at all times. For this exact reason. You should put them together. Make a motzi.
Rabbi,
Yeah.
quick question. So are you talking about Friday night or Saturday morning for Kiddush? If you don't have two complete challahs.
Yeah. Okay. For sure Friday night. No. Yeah, what do you do? Good. Yes, I'm trying to remember. What do you do? Okay. The obligation. Very good. Okay, there's more of a mitzvah to have a Su'udah Shabbos day, the daytime. Friday night is more important to have Kiddush. What do you do in this? Schneer! I don't know if you can hear me. He's in the next room. He taught me, we gave a whole class and we got tested on this. And I don't remember. Okay.
I don't know. I thought I read that you hold the bigger piece slightly higher.
Oh, yeah.
When you say the bracha on the challah.
Yes, Rabbi, he's right.
On the bigger piece, meaning if you had it cut, or if you have two challahs that are whole, what do you?
Two challahs which are whole, but one of them is bigger, slightly bigger in size.
On the bottom? Okay. Yeah. Okay. So in Chabad, we hold them side by side because it's a
right.
machlokes of what you should exactly do. Does the preference go on the top or on the bottom? So the Rebbe would hold them side by side. The one in his right hand would hold slightly higher. The one in his right hand he would hold slightly higher, and he would cut that one. That's what the Rebbe did.
Okay.
Schneer. Okay, I don't know. He's next door. Whatever. Okay, I believe Friday night you go ahead, you do it. Whatever you use them Friday night, either or. You cut them in half. I'm talking about a case where you don't have two full challahs, right? You don't have two full challahs. You just cut the challah in half and or whatever, or it doesn't have to be a whole half, and you make them together to have lechem mishnah. To make sure you have lechem mishnah. Now Shabbos day, what's another option you can do? There's a whole problem over here. There's a law of kiddush makom su'udah. When you make kiddush, you have to have a su'udah. You have to eat a meal in the place that you have kiddush. There's a lot of laws with regards to that. What constitutes a meal? Does it have to be with bread? Well, no, says the Torah. Says Shulchan Aruch. The Alter Rebbe writes it's not. It doesn't have to necessarily be bread, because mizonot, any of the 5 grains which are baked, the Torah calls it a mazon, a meal, a satiating meal. So why often in shul, and another thing that calls it is wine. Wine also is it gives it's a su'udah for the heart. It makes a su'udah. So there's 3 things you can do after you have kiddush. you have to make a su'udah right then and there. You have to eat a meal. So either you can drink another revius of wine, which is 3 ounces, 3.5 ounces of wine. You can have bread. You can eat crackers, or you can wash for a meal. Now, another issue that pops up is that you can't eat if you eat mizonos. If you have crackers and then you eat a bunch of food, then you have to bench. You have to say the Birkat Hamazon after, and it's very complicated. Like, people just don't do it. So it's a very tricky situation. People try to avoid that because it's weird. You shouldn't have really done that. You should have really had bread if you're going to make a whole meal for other halachic reasons. Now, why am I saying all this? Okay, so on Shabbos day, let's say you only have one challah. You have one challah, yeah, sometimes it happens. You should cut it in half Friday night. You should eat your meal with your bread. Now comes Shabbos day, 12 o'clock in the afternoon, Saturday, and your time to eat kiddush. You want to eat a meal. So an option you can do is you can make kiddush, have a little bit of crackers or more wine, eat some crackers, whatever, bench, and then just have a regular meal. And then just eat afterwards, just eat your challah into whatever, but don't wash. It's a little trick, a trick of the trade. Not preferable, but it takes care of a lot of issues. Okay, whatever. Just you guys should know that. Okay, does anybody have any questions? I want to mention something about breakaway challah. We're talking a little bit about lechem mishnah, 2 breads. Lechem mishnah, there's something called breakaway challah, where I don't know if you guys have ever seen it. It's like an octagon. Yeah, you take it out of a lot of Chabad on campuses use it where they have tons of students. So basically it's a big it's challah, and it's like partitioned off. There's like little challahs that looks like little challahs attached to it. And you can pull off the challah, and you pull up little pieces of challah and put them together. Yeah. Whatever. Have you guys ever seen it? Whatever. It's actually very problematic. You're not allowed to bake challah. You're not allowed to bake challah that way. All the dough attached. Let me give you a practical example. In Chabad, the best way to have your meal, if you have guests over your home, is that each person should say their own kiddush. Each man should say their own kiddush. Reason being, the mitzvah of kiddush is to hear every word. It's very hard to hear every word from somebody else. So in Chabad, we try to encourage people to make their own kiddush so they can hear it themselves. Another thing we do is that each person should say their own hamotzi. So a lot of homes, you'll go to homes in let's say Crown Heights, the main neighborhood for Chabad, and you go to a meal. A lot of times there'll be little beklach, little challah rolls, 2 challah rolls for each couple or each person. Now, that's the best way to do it. So a lot of times you'll go to a place where they'll bake these breakaway challahs, so that each person can just, instead of buying a bunch of little bekalach or making a bunch of little bekalach, little challahs, everyone can just break 2 pieces, and they look whole. You put them together, and you can make your own hamotzi. The problem is you can't make a challah that way lichatchila from the outset. You can't make a challah like that because it's really one. The question is it one big challah or is it a bunch of separate challahs? So if you make it, the opinion, at least in Chabad, is if you can't make it like that from the beginning. You can't have all this dough attached to each other, and then when it bakes, then you break it off afterwards. It has to be that in the process itself, in the cook, when they can be close enough together that in the oven, when they expand, they can touch and become one. But they can't be attached going into the oven. Does that make sense? If you want to do it, just call somebody. Call me or call Rabbi Silverberg about how to do it. Don't make breakaway challahs are controversial. Just be careful with breakaway challahs. Okay. I'm going to assume there's no questions. That's good. Okay, I'm going to skip this malicha. This is called malicha. This has to do with koshering meat. Just a brief overview. Why is kosher meat? Kosher meat is very salty. Why? Because you can't have blood. The blood takes away all of the salting. Now, all of the salt takes away all of the blood. We have to be very careful not to have blood. So it's very salty. That's why kosher salt. What is kosher salt? It's thick salt that's cut thick because you want to try to get all the meat out, all the blood out. Now there's a process of when we shecht an animal, you have to skin the animal, right? You get the meat out that you want. You wash it. You got to put it in water. It's a serious process. You have to see people do it to know how to do it. Put it in water for a while, washes off some of the blood. Then you got to salt it. Then you put it back in the water, knock it off, take it back out, put some more salt on it, put it back in. And it's a whole long process. You think chicken takes like a couple hours to do. One chicken. Okay, anyway, it's called malicha. You don't have to worry about it. Just buy your chicken from a reliable hechsher. Okay, we're going to skip all this. It's just Nesh Negeya. There's certain parts of halacha you might say, well, I want to learn all of halacha because it's all of Torah. But in general, you stick with what is practical. That's the first thing you learn is what's practical. Okay, so let's move on. Now, this is regards to actually had someone coming to me today. They want to kasher their kitchen. And do I have to bring all my stuff to the mikvah? We have a halacha, and we learn it out in Devarim, that when a Jew takes possession of kalim, of utensils that you're going to eat on, food is going to touch, you have to take it out of the status of a non-Jew. So if you buy it from, Sears, for example, well, I don't know, Sears doesn't exist. Okay, I don't know, Home Depot. It's an interesting question. Home Depot is owned by a Jew. Okay, a non-Jewish company, so it's in the ownership, it's owned by a non-Jew, and a Jew takes possession, he has to change its status. Because eating by us is not, we don't just eat for the sake of eating, we eat with a divine purpose. So everything about the eating process has to be infused with this divine purpose, divine intent. So we put it in the mikvah. And it has to be a kosher mikvah. It has to be a mikvah that you can go, a woman can go nowadays and use as a mikvah. It has to be like totally kosher, not just a man's mikvah. Men's mikvah can be not as stringently kosher because we don't have a real mitzvah today to go to the mikvah, but a woman still does. It's a serious thing. Now you put it in the mikvah, and now you can go ahead and use it. Now, let me a very practical thing. Whose mitzvah is it? Am I not allowed to go to your house? Let's say you forgot to put a utensil in the mikvah. Can I eat off of your utensil? So the truth is, if you're careful with the reading, I could. You probably can't, but I can, because the mitzvah is on you, the owner of the utensil. That's who the owner is. Now, what I wanted to mention, what are kosher mikvahs? What's not a kosher mikvah? Not a kosher mikvah is a river. A river is a very problematic thing for many reasons. You can't really use a river for a mikvah. And it has to do with the fact it's not collected. What happens is the water in a river at times of the year overflows outside of its boundaries, and especially in the rainy seasons, and therefore it's not considered really collected in one spot, and that's a problem. It has to be collected in one spot. So we actually don't use a river as a mikvah. A man will use it, whatever. It's fine. But a woman cannot use a river. There's a big question about the ocean, but it seems like most poskim nowadays hold that an ocean is totally fine. And it cannot be a man-made lake. You can use a lake, provided it's not man-made. It can't be a man-made lake. It has to be natural. Let's see. Okay. There's a couple of things I wanted to tell you. Okay, now utensil, it only has to be items that food is going to touch. So, for example, let's say you have a George Foreman grill. Yeah, a George Foreman grill. You know what that is? So food is going to touch the inside grates. What about the outside of the George Foreman grill? So the outside of the grill doesn't have to go into the mikvah, because food, you're not cooking food, or it's not intended to be on top, on the outside. So only the parts where the food is going to be cooked or placed with intent has to be put into the mikvah. So you could argue that really a knife or a fork, in our house we do. Sometimes we scoop things up with the handle part of the fork. But you can argue, like, I only put food on the actual pokey parts of the fork. That's the only part that needs to go into the mikvah. You should put the whole thing in the mikvah, but whatever, it's fine. When it comes to electronic items, so there are those that say, and it's a very accepted opinion, that if it's going to be ruined by putting it into the mikvah, you don't have to put it in the mikvah. But it's been tested, tried and tested. The putting, let's say, a hot water heater into the mikvah and don't use it for 24 hours, just don't turn it on, don't do anything, even though it's electric, it'll be fine. So it's up to you whether you want to stick your hot water urn or something like that, electronic, into the mikvah. Just be careful, whatever. It's up to you if you want to do that. Okay, now what happens if you're buying an item from a Jew? Then you don't have to bring it to the mikvah, right? So in Israel, very often you don't have to bring it. You don't have to bring it to the mikvah. So if it's manufactured and made and owned by a Jew, then you don't bring it to the mikvah. Now, there's a bracha that you say. There's a bracha that you say before you're about to dip it in the mikvah. Personally, I never say the bracha because I was taught in yeshiva. We don't know if it was owned by a Jew or a non-Jew. I can't know for sure. I don't really know the status of the items that I buy. I buy them from Crate and Barrel, but like, I don't exactly, whatever it is, I'm not really sure. I don't know who owns it, So it's better not to say the bracha at all. And there are many people do say the bracha, but I personally don't say the bracha ever. Because if it's owned by a Jew, right? If it's owned by a Jew and I take it and I put it in the mikveh and I say a bracha, it's a bracha levatala. I said it in vain. Because I shouldn't have brought it into the mikveh. I didn't have to bring it to the mikveh to begin with. You can do whatever you want. One time I went to my wife and I went to a kalim mikveh. So there's a mikveh that are just for kalim, for utensils. And there was a guy outside with a bunch of plates and everything. He was waiting for us to leave and he was very friendly. And then we left and I had forgotten something. We laughed at it and it was his turn to go. And he had closed the door. And I saw him and he was meditating and he was singing nigunim really, really loud and with like a lot of kavanah, a lot of intention. And he was like, it was a very spiritual experience for him to dip it in the mikvah because there's a mitzvah. So like, I guess before any mitzvah that he does, he gets very excited and he sings nigunim. And it was very nice. I felt kind of weird, like, opening the door. Let me just get my little handkerchief, whatever. It was all well. He was in a different world. It all worked out well. Okay. Let me just okay, we'll do one ice over here and then we'll move on. And then we'll take a break. When you buy metal or glass utensils that are used for food from a non-Jew, even when they are new, you may not use them for any food-related purpose, even if the food is cold, unless you immerse them in a natural spring or mikvah that is valid for ritual immersion for women at the end of her menstrual period. In other words, a real kosher mikvah. So this has nothing to do with kashrus. You might say, well, I'm just going to put cold food, right? If cold food falls on a treif plate, you can still eat the cold food if the plate was clean, because there was no issue of transference of taste, or we have no problem, right? Familiar with that? We learned that a long time ago. This has nothing to do with kashrus. This is a spiritual idea. Mikvah is something completely different. The purpose of this immersion is to elevate the utensils from the impurity of a heathen to the holiness of Jewish ownership. Let me just do this. Before the ritual immersion, the following bracha is recited. If you're immersing one utensil, you say Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu Asher Kishanu b'mitzvah Yisrael v'tzivanu al tevilas keli, and if it's more, al tevilas kelim. Kelim is the plural on the immersion of kelim. We'll do one more halacha. Since the utensils must be immersed only in a place that is valid for immersion of women, therefore care must be taken not to immerse them in a river. Oh, here we go. When they are fuller than usual from the abundant rains and melting snow. This occurs frequently between Pesach, when the rivers rise, and still people use them for immersing utensils, and that is a problem. Don't use a river, a natural running river. Okay. Anybody have any questions? Is anybody here? Okay. All right. Shorter class.
Question.
Yeah.
Question.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
So can you chlorinate the mikvah?
Yes, we do. Good question.
Okay.
We do. In fact, my eyes burn when I come out of the men's mikvah. Like my skin's on fire. It's very chlorinated.
Yeah. So as long as the water though is then from natural source, so the
Yes.
chlorination and anything else does not affect.
Yeah, and it's only and interestingly enough, which I didn't know, because we're building a new mikvah here. The amount of rainwater that it needs to be is not so much. It's not as much rainwater as you need. It's just that we put in like a little bit more than the minimum measure of rainwater, and then you can mix in regular tap water, as long as there's a certain minimum measure of rainwater that's found in there. And that's majority of what we use. It's majority like water from the hose. It just it's connected to and it's mixed together with the minimum measure, or like more than a minimum. It's much more than the minimum measure of rainwater, which is very interesting, by the way. I didn't know that.
And on the challah baking, in that chapter, does it have any information regarding like when you measure flour for a dough, like you have different weight based on the whole wheat flour, which has not been like filtered out, so to speak, and then the weight of the bleached flour, which is for all purpose. It's different from like when you do measurements, they come out different. Does it have anything in this Safaria about that?
No, it doesn't. I don't think it doesn't divide. It didn't divide
between
that.
whole wheat and
One second. It's in Lamed Hay. It's in 35. 1 second. No, I don't.
It doesn't have anything. Okay.
It's
just
very short. Yeah, Borscht, not sufficient. Again, here we go.
Yeah, I think at some point. Oh, here. The minimum of dough must have. See, 5/4 of flour. That's like based on how much cup it's gonna come out to. Yeah, I think with Robinson Miriam Lepkowski, we were talking and discussing about this. I think so you have to actually take into consideration that the flour which is bleached will have like if you measure in cups, so it will have like 5 exact cups. But if you're gonna use like whole wheat challah, whole wheat flour, which is not bleached, then it may come out as a different weight. So yeah. So anyways, okay, I will look into it. Thank you.
I know that most people, like majority of everybody, they do the whole 5 pounds. 5 pounds is like the standard. Everyone just does 5 because it takes care of all opinions. The minimum, at least 5 pounds.
Yeah.
But I don't. Good question. Yeah, the rabbi will probably know. Sorry.
Okay. Thank you.
Good question. Okay, with that, I leave you guys, and we'll see.
Quick.
Yeah.
Real quick, Rabbi.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think we covered this before, but I can't remember. Now, you cannot causterize with boiling hot water, because I thought that you can do that on your kitchen with boiling hot water.
Of course. No, you
countertops
do.
And
you do. Yeah.
Oh, you can.
That
okay.
Yeah. The way it became not kosher is how you make it kosher. So if it became so if you hot water. If it was an issue, if you boiled something treif inside your pot, the way to make it not treif, which we'll talk about a little bit later, the way to make it treif, not treif, or to make it kosher again, is by boiling the water again. Yeah, for sure. Boiling water is probably the most common way of making something kosher. Now, boiling water will not work for a pan, because you put a pan into an oven, and then it uses fire, not hot water, but fire. And so therefore, to make it kosher, you have to use fire again. The way it became not kosher is how you make it kosher. Same way you make it kosher, right? So yes, for sure use that one.
Right. Yeah. Okay, so like for Pesach, preparing for Pesach, you can boil the water and throw it all over the counter.
Yeah, but when we get there, it's a little bit. But it's a little more complicated than that, because you have to if you're pouring water, it's called iroi. When you pour it, it cools down. The air cools it down. So you have to be able to do something that maintains it boiling for a moment, at least, just for a moment on the countertop, to make sure it's boiling on the countertop. And there's 2 ways to do it, and we'll get like around Pesach, maybe I'll do it. Or if you have a question, I'll tell you. I can tell you in a voice.
Okay.
Exactly.
Awesome.
All right.
Thank you.
All right, everybody. Okay, so tonight should be Rambam. and then tomorrow weekly roundup, etc., etc. All right, you guys have a good evening.
Thank you.
All right, I'll see you again. Bye-bye.